Welcome to this session on how to answer Unseen Poetry Part 1, Literature Paper 2, AQA Exam Board GCSE. So, first thing I would be looking for when we are answering this question. It will give you an unseen poem, it will not expect you to have seen it before. If you've seen it before, it's a miracle. Okay, do not expect to have seen it before. So I would look for these things. So firstly, I would look for a semantic field or an extended metaphor. So as a reminder, a semantic field is a group of words with the same theme that are being used consistently throughout the poem to describe something. It is not what the poem's about. If you have got a poem about war, the semantic field is not war. You might have a poem that is describing a thunderstorm, but is describing it as if it's a war. That would be a semantic field of war. Or it might be an extended metaphor. Extended metaphor just means that it's using the same metaphor all the way through and is just continuously developing it. So that's the first thing I'd look for. With this, particularly with the extended metaphor, look at what the question is. If you read the poem and have absolutely no idea what it's about, doesn't matter. The question will probably tell you. And you're constantly linking back to this question, regardless of whether or not you can actually identify where that question is coming from in the poem. Trust the question. That's probably whatever your extended metaphor is going to be. So, next thing I'd do is I would zoom in on at least 2 quotes. By zooming, you're picking out a keyword, at least one from each of the quotes, word class, connotations. You would then need to look at the structure of the poem. So by structure, I mean, what's the rhyme scheme? Does it have a particular form? Is it a sonnet? Can you tell? If you can't, leave that one, that's fine. You might look at line lengths. Are they all the same? Are they all different? You might look at the length of the poem. So maybe it being particularly long or particularly short suggests something about the message it's putting through. And then finally, I would look at stanzas. Are they regular? Are they irregular? Are they all the same kind of shape and size? And how many are there? Is there some kind of symbolism to that number? So those are the things we are going to be looking for as we annotate this poem. So I have taken this unseen poem called First Love by John Clare. And let's have a read through it. I near was struck before that hour, with love so sudden and so sweet. Her face it bloomed like a sweet flower, and stole my heart away complete. My face turned pale as deadly pale. My legs refused to walk away. And when she looked, what could I ail? My life and all seemed turned to clay. And then my blood rushed to my face, and took my eyesight quite away. The trees and bushes round the place seemed midnight at noonday. I could not see a single thing. Words to my eyes did start. They spoke as chords do from the string, and blood burnt round my heart. Are flowers the winter's choice? Is love's bed always snow? She seemed to hear my silent voice, not love's appeals to know. I never saw so sweet a face as that I stood before. My heart has left its dwelling place, and can return no more. And our question is, in First Love, how does the poet present the effects of falling in love? So first thing I'm going to do is highlight that question. So we're looking at the effects of falling in love. It's 24 marks. So you are going to be spending a good chunk of time on this section. Not as long as you would for your Inspector Call essay, or whatever else you're doing in terms of the drama text you're studying. But it's a significant chunk of time. So, in terms of this, the poem's about love. We can tell that from the title, and it's talking about love here. there isn't necessarily a very explicit extended metaphor happening, because the title's about love and the question's about love. So if we look at the semantic field, is there a theme that is repeated throughout? And I'm going to highlight that in green, because I would say that our semantic field throughout this is nature. So we've got bloomed, flower, clay, trees, bushes, midnight, moon day, flowers again, winters, snow. You could potentially do bed in terms of a flower bed. Up to you. So I would go through those, and I'd then make myself a key and say our semantic field is nature. Next thing I would do is look at what do nature and love have in common. So I'd maybe talk about romantic point of view, so romanticist lens, and that would look at nature as sublime, powerful, omnipotent. Use what knowledge you already have. Okay? If you've done the Power and Conflict selection of poems, then you will already know about romanticism. If there's nature in the poem, link it in. This is just about applying your own interpretation of the poem. Okay? It's about how confidently you can argue your point. So I might link in romanticism. I might maybe mention that nature's a cycle. And I might also start to think about the fact that sometimes nature is temporary. Or actually, rather than saying sometimes it's temporary, I might go it's often destroyed by humanity's arrogance. And I'm not necessarily thinking about love at the minute, I'm thinking about nature. But my job now would be to link each of these things to nature. Each of these things to love, sorry. So the effects of falling in love. I'd go, okay, love's omnipotent. I wouldn't say love is sublime, but I'd go with the idea that love is powerful and should therefore be respected. It can be beautiful, but it should also be feared. In terms of a cycle, I might link that to the effects of falling in love, the honeymoon phase, breakups, falling in love again. It's almost a cycle, just like how nature has the seasons. And then destroyed by humanity's arrogance, nature in terms of climate control, deforestation, etc. But love maybe in terms of not communicating, rose-tinted glasses, not seeing each other's flaws, thinking each other's perfect when perfection doesn't exist. So I would link all of that to a couple of my keywords here. So if I just make a note, link to love. And that's my first point. I would go into more detail in it when I'm writing it up. I will do that in a different video. So the second thing I'm going to do is look for language techniques. Specifically, language techniques where it's got something I want to zoom in on in. So I'm going to do this in a different colour so that it shows the difference between the semantic field and the quotes that I'm choosing. So the first one I'm going to do is one that has actually got links to my semantic field. I'm going to do her face, it bloomed like a sweet flower. If I make some notes up here, so it bloomed like a sweet flower. Okay, first thing, simile. I've got my language technique. Next thing I'm going to do is zoom in. And the first word I'm going to zoom in on is flower. So word class of flower, concrete noun. Connotations, kind of similar to nature, which we've already mentioned, but I might think of beauty. I might link it to fragility. Would I link it to anything else? I mean, I guess I could link it to it's a stereotypical or a traditional gift, particularly on first dates, where the effect of falling in love might be seen. Okay, and then, if I had more room here, I might make some more notes about each of these things. So, fragility. There's inevitably going to be a breakup. So, just like how flowers die and nothing lasts, neither's going to first love, falling in love, love is temporary, it's not necessarily going to last. Either because the person you're in love with dies or your love dies. Equally, we could link that to the fragility of a relationship itself and how it's reliant on two people. And again, the idea of communication. Flowers are quite easily crushed underfoot. Falling in love is quite a vulnerable process. So like a flower, it's fragile. But equally, we can link it to beauty in the fact that, particularly through rose-tinted glasses, it looks very appealing. People are often quite jealous of those in love. Falling in love often is seen as a good thing, but there's this kind of undertone of vulnerability and destruction that can come with falling out of it. So I would leave that for now, I think. I'm not going to go into major detail about it. So, if I get another quote, just section that a bit off. Okay, the other quote I'm going to do, because remember I want 2 quotes to zoom on, I'm going to do, and blood burnt round my heart. So, if I'm looking at language techniques, I have got 2 here. I have got a metaphor, because blood is not actually burning round their heart. And I've also got plosive alliteration of blood burnt, which is quite a harsh sound. So the plosive is just the fact that it's the letter B, which is repeated, the B sound. Plosive also links to a P sound. In this case, we've got a B. The word I'm going to zoom in on is burnt. So, staff, sorry, it's a dynamic verb. Connotations of burnt. So remember, I want my connotations to be themes and emotions, usually abstract nouns. So I'm going to go with destruction, pain. I'm going to stick with those 2, I think. So, destruction. Effects of falling in love. Love is easily destroyed, particularly if it's a first love and you're just falling in love, because you've not got that connection yet with each other where you've got a solid foundation. It's quite fragile in that sense, linking back to the flower. So love easily breaks down. It's quite a vulnerable thing. Both love itself and the person opening themselves up to love. In terms of pain, hurts to get your heart broken. It might hurt some people to be vulnerable. And equally, potentially, as suggested by this, maybe it hurts to be rejected. It hurts to love someone who's not going to love you back. and I'd maybe link this to the fact we've got the juxtaposition of burnt and heart. So we've got that juxtaposition of violence and love. That again suggests the effects of falling in love are not all positive. It's a lot deeper than that. Okay, so I've got my second quote. So the last thing I'm going to do is the structure. So if I just make some notes down here, first thing I'm looking for is, does it have a rhyme scheme? Hour, sweet, flower, complete, pale, away, ale, clay. Face, away, place, noonday, thing, start, string, heart. Choice, snow, voice, no, face, before, place, no more. So yeah, I would say there's a regular rhyme scheme because it's all the way through. There's no irregularities there. So the next thing I need to do is, what does this suggest? And you're basically making it up to make it link to your point. Regular rhyme scheme, it's quite predictable. It makes it sound quite light-hearted, which I guess kind of the effects of falling in love almost mask the potential pain, because no one goes into love wanting to get their heart broken. They'll go in optimistically hoping that it doesn't happen. So I guess that can be masked by the light-hearted rhyme scheme. It's quite predictable. So if you were looking at it the other way, so remember, highest marks always include more than one interpretation of the same thing. In terms of it being predictable, we could link that to a pessimist going, love always ends. We know what's going to happen. Either someone dies or the love breaks down. Okay, in terms of form, there's not a particular structure here that I could necessarily pick out. It's not a sonnet, because a sonnet's 14 lines. A sonnet is probably the only thing that I would be looking to identify. I might see if it's got iambic pentameter. So I ne'er was struck before that hour, with love so sudden and so sweet. So no, it's not iambic pentameter, because that's 10 syllables per line. So I'm going to ignore form, it's not important. Line lengths. They vary a little bit, but not massively. I wouldn't say they really vary enough to comment on. I suppose we could comment on how further down they're a bit more varied, but they're not really identical enough or varied enough to say much about. Length of the poem is fairly long, not massively. I think that's it's kind of in a middle place here, where if it was shorter, we could make a comment on the effects of falling in love being short-lived. If it was longer, we could talk about the optimism of falling in love and that it might last. But in the middle, it's kind of in a funny place there. And stanzas. We've got 3 stanzas. And are they regular? They look it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we've got regular stanzas. And I'd maybe link that in down here with the predictability. So you can talk about the regular rhyme scheme and the regular stanzas at the same time. And that is the extent of annotations I would do on the poem. In the exam, I obviously would not take this long, but I wanted to demonstrate what exactly I would be looking for. I will be explaining how to write this in another video. So thank you for watching.